Hello, creators. Welcome back to another episode of the Video Creators Podcast. My name is Tim Schmoyer. Just kidding. That's not actually, it's not actually true.
Surprise, Tim got a makeover. He grew a beard.
We got him tied up somewhere. We have overtaken the channel, and what are you going to do? You guys are just in for a real treat today. My name is Lennon. If you haven't met me before, I am one of the strategists here on the Video Creators team, and I'm joined by my cohort here, Delana, who is, we basically do the same things around here, but just different things. So
it's true. That's a really great description of it. It's the same, but different.
Yeah. Tim was like, so I'm going to be gone. Can you guys run the podcast for me? And we were like, yeah, that sounds great. So
yeah,
we'll do it. We'll see what happens here. So today we're talking a lot about what happens. What's the trap that we set for ourselves? What's the trap that gets set that keeps us from growing on YouTube? So whenever it comes to growth and starting our channels, it usually starts really exciting. We have a lot of hope, a lot of aspirations, and then we can create for a few months. And if we don't see a return, and Delana and I were actually having a conversation about this earlier today, if we don't see a return on our time and our money and our investments, like it pretty quickly becomes a drain. It feels like a time suck. We're not sure, what's happening, what's wrong. And we can easily lose our creative spark and be really fighting to figure out what to do next, and honestly, it feels like it shouldn't be that hard, and it shouldn't be that hard. And we want to talk about today the mindset traps that we fall into that keep us from growing from the beginning or reaching the next level, depending on where you're at. And I'm really excited about this. Delana is going to be spearheading this topic. And there's some really cool stuff in the notes. So I'm excited to be going over this. And we also have, let's see here, who is our moderator today? We have Modern Day Tech as our moderator, I believe. So you can tag Modern Day Tech in the chat room here, and we will take any questions that are on topic when it comes to mindset and being stuck and what it takes to get past those traps that we set for ourselves often when it comes to growing our channel. And so we're excited to have Modern Day Tech here. Yeah, we appreciate you doing this as always, and all of our moderators. So Delana, we've already been chatting a little bit today, but why don't you let us know how you're doing? What are you up to?
I'm good. So this past week, I've really been focused on getting my healthy eating back on track, because after the move and just a lot of personal things going on in my life over the past 6 months, I mean, my whole health journey, whatever, just totally went off the rails. It was just not an option. We were eating a ton of frozen meals. We tried to keep them relatively healthy, but then you were also just like, okay, I've been moving boxes and stuff all day. I just want whatever's easiest. And so that's where I've been. And so now I've gotten back into meal prepping and planning and eating. I eat mostly Whole30 meals because it's what works best for my body. And it's been really, really refreshing. For the first time, I'm in this trying to let myself slow down and just enjoy the simple things in life, like cooking. And I've never enjoyed cooking before, not a cooking person. So it's been really nice. That reminds me, I need to go grocery shopping. But yeah.
So if we lose Delana halfway through, we'll know what happened.
I'm just going to leave you to do this.
Yeah, that's it's been a interesting weekend. So I got to play drums for the first time in a while, which was really fun this weekend. I lost so many of my gigs over because of the COVID thing. And so being able to actually get out and play was a lot of fun. But I realized, because I've been taking so much of my weekends off, I realized how I start to mentally create this baggage of like, oh, I still have somebody that's holding me accountable to something, and how enjoyable it's been to just have the weekends to like hang out with my kids and my wife and just do, what we want to do. And so not having that was, while it was really great to do this thing I love to do, it was like, man, I've really love just being able to hang out on a Saturday and a Sunday and not have anything going on. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's crazy that I think that idea, like you said, of slowing down and enjoying the things that are the most important. That priority list has really been doing a lot of shifting for me lately. Been working some with a life coach and dealing with some of that stuff, like on a pretty heavy priority situation for us. So
Mhm.
I can relate to that for sure.
It's hard. You get so caught up in like all the busyness that you're just kind of like all the simple things feel unimportant, but I feel like it's the simple things that make life enjoyable. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I just took a walk yesterday morning and it just enjoyed like not, I'm so bad about, okay, I got to be listening to a podcast or an audiobook or like doing something to feel like I'm
Yes.
being productive. And that's
Yes.
such a lie, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like when I read that thing about our energy being a resource, that was such a big aha moment for me where it's like, man, I am spending so much energy all the time, whether I realize it or not. It's like learning is still taking energy. I have to be cautious of that too. So,
Yes,
yeah,
recovering addict in the chat said mindfulness is a good thing. Yes,
it,
just like really being where you are in the moment. Oh,
yeah.
Professor said, life's a journey, not a destination. Who said that? Oh, I said, that's not an original quote. It's been around for a while, but I appreciate the credit.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Yeah. So today we are talking about some of those mindset type things when it comes to our YouTube channel. Delana, I know you've set aside some points here.
Mhm.
Why don't you get us started on some of this stuff?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, because I know that some people were asking in the chat, Modern Day Tech is our moderator today. So if you have any questions throughout this, specifically more if they're on topic about some of the struggles we're about to cover, just tag him in the chat and he'll be sure to get your questions in front of us. So, all right, let's get into it. So, I have 8 points, 8 main points that I've noticed after working with, Lennon and I work with creators on a daily basis, whether it's in consultations, the action plan, which is our most private program that we offer, video labs, our private community, 30 days to a better you, like everything in between. We are always working with creators, and these are just a lot of themes that and traps that we find specifically that are mindsets that tend to hold creators back. And the first thing is that you probably gonna some of you may have heard this one before and you're gonna be like, come on. But the first thing is you're too focused on the numbers. And what do I mean by this? Because shouldn't we be paying attention to our analytics? Isn't that a good thing to look at so that we know what's going on with our channel and everything in between? And yes, it is. But if you become consumed with your numbers to the point where you are counting every subscriber and every view and every watch time hour and everything in between, and you notice every tiny little fluctuation, it can be, I'm laughing at the chat, Maximalist Minibus said she knew I was going to say this because she knows me. But it is true. Those analytics, it is important to immerse yourself in them while you are trying to learn analytics, but there does become a point where honestly, they become toxic for a creator. And if you are checking them every single day, counting every single number, counting them every day, you might want to take a step back. The creators that tend to find the best balance are the ones who can know when and how to look at their data in the way that is the most productive. And so productive for their creativity, productive for the strategy on their channel, and everything in between. So, Lennon, do you have any thoughts? Have you noticed any themes like that with creators?
Yeah. I mean, I start every Video Labs class asking the question, what's your goal in terms of by the time we're done with this course, what would you like to see happen? And I would say a good 80% always say, well, I want to hit a certain subscriber number. I want to hit, 100,000 subscribers. I want to hit 10K subscribers by the end of the class, whatever it is, right? And I always like to just kind of let it go and then follow up with, but if you don't know why you want those numbers, then there's going to be problems because once you hit those numbers, then you're just going to want more of those people because you don't know what you really want to do with those people. And it can be a really slippery slope. And I say this a lot, that I think seeing the potential, which is what we do on YouTube, is really dangerous. Like when we can see, oh, it looks like everybody has 100,000 subscribers or more, because that's the stuff that we tend to watch. We have to be reminded like that potential is a dangerous thing to constantly be setting ourselves up against, because it forces us to not run our own race, to not like put our blinders on and go for it in the way that's going to work well for us and the people that we need to serve. And so I've really gotten back to this thought, and we were talking about this today, Delana and I, this idea of, how are we serving the people that exist in our house already, and let that then allow itself to expand and grow in that way. And usually the other stuff will start to follow, or other things will happen that you just didn't even expect, that aren't numbers related, but are high rewards in other ways.
Yeah, like how are you I think that we get so focused on the gap, like the gap between where we are and where we want to be, and it can so easily become this anxious state that clouds creativity, clouds us being able to actually see what we need to do on our channel and what our channel is actually missing, and everything in between. And so whenever we just take a step back and, like Glennon said, focus, who do we have right now on our, even if you just have 100 subscribers, even if you have less than 100, how are we serving those people right now, and how can we serve them better? Because you're not going to reach any more people until you start serving the people that you already have right now. And that's the biggest thing, is focus on that human connection. All right. So point number 2, and this kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Piggybacks. That's the word I'm looking for. This piggybacks off of it. But whenever you are looking at the numbers and you are looking at your analytics, and again, this is not to say that looking at your analytics is bad. It can be very powerful and it's very necessary for creators. It's just about the balance, right? So number 2 is you're looking for what you want to see in the numbers and not what they are actually saying. So many creators kind of have a preconceived notion about whether their channel is working or not. And so whenever they go in to look at their analytics, they're subconsciously, I don't think that they usually do it consciously. It's not like they're going in there and thinking, oh, how can I find where I'm losing, or how can I find where it's not working? They're not consciously thinking that. But the numbers can be exactly the same, but it looks like because you're looking for it, you went into the mindset of there's something wrong with my channel, or my channel's not moving forward or something. It becomes not objective, and you look for what you want to see in the numbers rather than what's actually going on. And sometimes that has to do with how you're sorting the data. But mostly it is just the mindset that you have going into it. So I'd be very aware of that whenever you go in to look at your analytics, is really try to be objective of, am I actually looking at this as if this wasn't my channel? And I was just going to go in and look at it and tell someone, oh yeah, your channel's doing okay, your channel's doing good, your channel's doing bad, or here are the improvements that you need to make, or the things that you need to focus on. Any thoughts?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with this. I think we sometimes seek, we seek the thing that it can also like manifest its way as like self-sabotage if we're not careful, where it's like, oh, well, YouTube hates me, and the algorithm's against me. What am I being punished for? Any of those kinds of things that we start to hear. So it can be negative. And often, unfortunately, I think that's what I tend to see, is like a lot of people feeling like it's negative, like something, whatever's happening right now is a negative thing. Something's punishing me for whatever it is that I'm trying. Or, my niche is too small, or, there's no opportunity here, or any of that kind of stuff. And that's a really just an unhealthy place, I think. If we go back to this idea of like, what's your numbers and why do you want to do what you want to do? we often have to come back to this place of, well, what can we control? We can't control like how many subscribers we have. We really don't have any control over that. That's why everything we do to teach in 30 days, all the way up through video labs to action plan stuff, has to do with like, what are the metrics that we have control of over, and how do we make sure that we are, you know, seeking to make those better. And I think that's just a much healthier way to kind of to go after it, because then you just, again, get to kind of go on your own path.
Yeah. All right. So number 3, you've lost sight of why you actually started this channel. So that's another trap that a lot of creators fall into, especially if you've been creating content for a little while. Like, you're not necessarily a new creator. Say that you're anywhere between the 1,000 to 10,000 subscriber mark, and you've kind of been creating, you're looking to hit that next level. You've gotten into maybe a little bit of a flow, but now everything is either becoming redundant. You got momentum for a little while, but now it's not really taking you anywhere. And I have a Band-Aid on my finger, so that's why it looks weird. It looks like I'm missing one, a nail. But yeah, I think that this is really important. Like Lennon said, you know, what did you say? You asked them at the beginning of Video Labs class why they're there.
Well, I start with, what do you want? What are your goals?
Yeah.
And almost always it's subscriber based. And then I flip that and say, well, so now why do you want those subscribers?
And so why do you flip it and ask them, why do you want those subscribers?
For this very thing.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes they see that potential and say, I need that potential, right? But what is that potential even measuring up to, you know? And if we don't have that connector, so somebody, I was discussing with Delana earlier, like, one of my struggles is as a person is feeling like I want to be a provider for my family. I want to make sure I'm making enough money for my family to secure like my kids and my wife and support her in what she's doing. And you know, that's a really big deal for me. And so I was talking to a psychiatrist about this, and she said, well, what happens if instead of like constantly going after that thing, you just recognize that you are that thing already? And then how does that change something? And I was like, well, that actually changes things a lot, because there's a lot less anxiety toward, you know, chasing this idea of financials, or like, you know, these things that to some degree I don't have as much control over, same as subscribers. And now I'm more focusing on, okay, well, what are the things that can get me there that I do have control over, and acknowledging that like I embody the thing that I actually want already. The financial is just like another extra level to that. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a bit of a tangent, but.
So how does that help you like stay a little bit firmer on your why?
It keeps me, I'm always taking things back to, am I trying to fulfill something that once I hit it isn't going to actually fix anything, or am I going toward the deeper level of it? So, you know, like,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish. Go ahead. Yeah.
And what I think is so important about this, and I know that this is hard to see whenever you are especially a smaller creator, but we've seen so many creators reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of subscribers, and they're happy with the growth that they've had, but you can tell they don't really feel, and even sometimes they fully say that like they don't really feel satisfied with what they're actually doing on their channel. And we have the same conversations with them where it's like, well, why did you do this in the first place? You know, why did you start? What was the driving factor behind this? And that is like knowing whether it really comes down to like the message that you really want to ultimately help people with. There's kind of like your why power, and then there's the why power behind your business, your channel, stuff like that. So there's the personal why power of maybe I want to be able to control my own schedule. I want to be able to be available for my family, take off when I need to, stuff like that. But then the business or the YouTube channel has to have its own why power as well, in terms of what message is it driving into the world. And is that message something that you're really passionate about? Is that something that you could, I mean, if we're going to take an inch and run a mile, is that something that you could go to your deathbed feeling like, yeah, I could talk about this till I die, because that's how passionate I am. And I think that a lot of people a lot of creators tend to fall in the trap of seeing what's working and then trying to fit themselves into that mold rather than having their own strong why and going off of that. Like, try to think about what really comes naturally to you. I think we're getting into the next point here, so let me just say it. Or no, it's later in the point. So let's move on to number 4. And number 4 is going to be, if you feel like maybe it's not that you've lost sight of why, but maybe you're just starting your channel or you've been doing it for a while. Maybe you actually never really knew why you were doing it. You never really had a strong why power. And to that, I think it's really, really important. So much of what you do on your channel, the way that you edit your videos, the way that you speak to your audience, the beliefs that you share, the way that you lead them into whatever, if you're doing, Premiere Pro tutorials or you're doing Photoshop tutorials or something like that, it doesn't matter. There's always a belief. Like, think of Peter McKinnon. There's strong beliefs behind what he does as a creative person and why he loves this art form and why he thinks this art form is the best for him and stuff like that. And so discovering that why, that's a huge thing. Some people just lose sight of their why, but then some people start never really actually knowing what their why is. And that may just take some soul searching. You might have to take a step back or anything, but really ask yourself, what matters to me here? And what would I feel good, like fully satisfied at the end of the day, knowing that I accomplished this in someone else's life?
Yeah, I love that. And so Post Color Gear here says, so what would be, he's referencing this, what I was saying in Video Lab. So what would be a more appropriate response? Would it be income instead of like a sub count? And he says he's oversimplifying it here, but I would say it's exactly what Delana is saying, which is, what's the reason you want that income? What's the reason you want that sub count? Because if you can't really start there, then when the income comes slower than you want, or when the sub count comes slower than you want, it's really hard then to have something to keep the fire ignited and going. So what we're looking at here is more on a long-term basis, and it's not as much about, a right now, let's fix the problem now, because what we want for you guys is like, how are you building something that is going to last you years? That's not just here for, a few months for you to dabble in it and then be kind of done. Like, we'd rather have you guys have something that serves you for years and years, right? Because I think that's what's the most valuable, not only to you, but to your audience.
Yep. So if you were to give an example of like what an appropriate response to that would be, what would you say?
Yeah. So I always like when people are like, my goal is to really help. Okay. So I have one client that I just did a consult with where he does real estate. And so, yeah, he wants to sell real estate. But the thing that he wants to do beneath that is to help people realize that they're not a slave to something that they don't actually enjoy, that they really have opportunity with something that's fairly easy to learn. And you can be like an honest, just straightforward person. You don't have to have all this crazy knowledge to be able to do it. And when he's focused on that in that way, then it's like any little feedback, any positive thing. Like he posted something on Instagram where he was watching his nephew, and that was the whole thing. He was just showing how he was watching his nephew and how difficult it was. And he's like, I got more clients from that than I did with anything else. And he said that was like not only mind blowing to me, but it reminded me like, this is why I do this, is to like make it approachable, to make it something that people can connect with me as like an everyday person and what I do. And I loved that. I just thought that that's the kind of stuff that you're on the right track. Executing on that is not always easy, obviously, because guilty as charged. We get caught up in this idea of doing it for growth. But sometimes growth comes slower, so you have to have this thing to fall back into.
Well, and the growth usually comes from you being focused on the person and not the growth. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that, whenever we're just looking at the numbers saying, how can I increase these? How can I increase these? You're totally missing the point. It's how can I connect with the person that I want to connect with? And fully, that might come by fully understanding who they are and what they're about, or it might come from you being willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and share those more human sides of you, everything in between. I think we're getting a little ahead now. So a little ahead. I'm stumbling over my words, but let's go into number 5, which is you've gotten too consumed with what you feel like you should be doing rather than what you're actually passionate about. So this piggybacks a little bit off of the why power. I've noticed a lot of creators that we've worked with that find something that works on their channel. And then there's even a lot of advice out there that says, okay, once you find something that works, double down on what works and just do it over and over and over again until you have the growth that you want, essentially. But what comes down to this is that, or what it comes down to is that you, first of all, start to pigeonhole yourself. You start to grow an audience off of just one very niche topic or something like that. And then if you do anything else outside of that topic, it just tanks. It just doesn't do well because your audience doesn't respond to it. But also where this can hold you back at the beginning. So that's kind of from the perspective of somebody who'd been creating, they had some success and stuff. But from the beginning, if you're just getting started and you're trying to follow a market rather than follow a passion, then you're just going to hit a wall. Because if you're looking at YouTube and seeing what's working and you're like, oh, I like, I don't know, marble racing. I don't know why that came to my mind. Have you seen those videos before? The marble racing?
One of my last Video Lab students did marble racing.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
My husband loves them. We watch them together sometimes. They're fun. But like marble racing seems cool, and you go and you do that, and but you're not necessarily passionate about it. You're just kind of like, oh, that looks like it works. I want that kind of attention. And that's what we're thinking subconsciously. Again, I don't think that anybody's doing this maliciously, like, oh, let me grow a channel and get all my money or something like that from marble racing. But it's just that we go into it thinking, oh, I could do that. And so we do it, and then we don't get the attention that we want, and then we burn out. And so it comes back to, are you just following a market, or are you following something that you're genuinely passionate about, something that you could genuinely take? People are laughing at me saying marble racing. Marble racing rocks. Yeah, it's fun. Art within everything just said that in the chat. So anyways, I got distracted. Yeah, I think that, again, it's just kind of like, what's like 2 to 3 topics that you could just talk endlessly about, just to your friends, to your family, like just those things that just pour out of you easily. If somebody gets you started on a topic, you know that you're just going to go off about it for a long time, and it lights your fire. It's not just something that you're super knowledgeable about, but that it particularly like lights a fire in you whenever you talk about it. So really think about what that is for you. Might take a little bit of soul searching again, but finding your passion and not your market is more important, because there's a market for your passion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good, because it's like with that thought, it's something that I'll see too, where I've had multiple conversations, in the last year, where somebody comes to me and they're like, we've tried this thing and this is what we did. And so what do you want? Like, what should we do? what market should we get into? And I'm like, I cannot help you with that. I'm sorry, and I have to just be so straightforward and say, this is not our job. Our job is to take your vision and help you figure out how to marry that with making better content that gets served better on the platform. And that can be really hard for people to digest because they're like, well, I need help figuring out what that vision is. And we can go a little bit into that, but if you don't have at least some spark, and you're not, and you're just chasing a thing that, is in a niche because that's what you've been told to do, man, it just gets so rough. It just gets so hard. And I love this idea when you serve a person. Now, if it's marble racing, you're serving the marble racer person. What are their other things that they're excited about? And then you open up this whole world of like, what is marble racing to you as in your life? Where does it fit your functionality? Where does it like, then you got all these opportunities to tie these things together and create a whole bunch of different content. So you don't have to feel married to one thing forever. I think that's such a freeing thought versus this idea of I'm only going to ever make a marble video forever,
Well, and yeah, that's the whole reason that we get into a lot of, or it's a big reason that we get into a lot of the calls that we do with creators, or why they book calls with us is because they've gotten to a point where they are no longer seeing the growth that they had originally seen on their channel because they kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's only going to take you so far for so long, especially, again, if you're chasing a market and just thinking, oh, if I just pump out this type of content, then I should be able to get the kind of results that I want. I love what Mr. M's senior community said here in the chat. He said, even if you're doing the same thing, find different and interesting ways of doing that thing. Don't get boring. So yeah, even if it is on the same topic, what's a new angle that we can take on that topic? Can we wrap a story around it rather than just giving the straight information? Could we incorporate new primal branding elements? If you're not familiar with primal branding, it's a great book. Look it up. Read all about it. It's going to be immensely helpful in your YouTube channel. I'm not going to go into it right now, but yeah, that it's so true. And those are some of the creators that have reached that massive success. Is that Casey Neistat, for example, he doesn't vlog the same way that he did whenever he started. He's found new angles and new ways to do things to keep it fresh and new for his audience. All right. Number 6. So this one, we're going to get a little bit deep here, but number 6 is a pattern that I tend to see a lot in creators that we really have to exercise and work together to kind of pull it out. And a lot of times this comes out in conversations about primal branding. So again, if you're not familiar with the elements, look them up. 7 elements of primal branding. You could probably just Google them if you don't want to read the book or you're not a big reader. But number 6 is that you are afraid to get vulnerable. So something that I want you guys to keep in mind whenever you come and you listen to our podcasts and live streams, you watch our videos and everything in between, is that we teach the strategies and the knowledge and we give all of this out because it's all about connecting with the human. The human is on the other side of the screen. Like, you think about it like this. Whenever somebody turns on a YouTube video, they're not turning it on in a room of a group of people. Usually, sometimes I do that with my friends, right? If it's a funny video, but usually it's them with their phone right here. You're talking to one individual. Start thinking of YouTube as like a one-on-one thing, a very personal thing to where you can start to cultivate relationship with the person on the other side of the screen. Primal branding elements will help you do this a lot, but it's also just entirely a mindset shift of, I'm not just teaching and presenting information to you, but I am here to be a person and to connect with you. And letting those more personal sides of your life come out. That may come out in beliefs. It may come out in strong opinions. It may come out in silly things that you do and say in your video, but little things that people can grab onto. Things that people can have a problem with too, or things that people can't like, but it's really letting that personality show through and letting the human sides of you show through, and not getting too inhuman, I guess, in your videos.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I totally agree with all that. I think the vulnerability side is something that can be really difficult, but I think it's so important to highlight some of those inside feelings that we're having. And a lot of times, so we did recently in our private community a call with Matthew Dix, who's the author of Storyworthy, and which is an incredible book on storytelling. And he said that vulnerability is usually also that moment of transformation in what's happening in us. And that's a moment where somebody gets to connect and say, yeah, I'm similar to that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that you want to think about it is I would encourage you guys to go and do a deep analysis on some of your favorite creators and what really makes you feel connected to them. If you watch Peter McKinnon, what are the things that he says and does that you're just like, man, that guy really aligns with what I do and what I believe about art or anything like that? What are the things that he has shared over the years that has made you feel that way? And starting to incorporate stuff like that into your content, because it's usually a way of thinking that allows your viewers to align themselves or disalign themselves with you, and you just being willing to share that way of thinking in life.
Yep.
And really, it comes down to not hiding behind the information, right? I see this a lot in how-to channels. So, all right, let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is, it also piggybacks off of that, and I think I kind of already said it when I was kind of explaining number 6, but number 7 is that you've lost sight of what the YouTube strategies are for, and the YouTube strategies are to connect you with the human. So I feel like we kind of already dove into that a little bit, but do you have anything else to add there, Lennon?
Sorry.
You're good. I put you on the spot.
I was muted trying to answer a chat. No. I think you're right. I think we've locked into that for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then last one is number 8. And this is not going to be for everyone, but I feel like it does need to be said. And that you're doing YouTube because you feel like you should and not because you actually like doing it. And this is a trap that I find a lot of business owners actually fall into, is that everybody's saying, oh, you got to be on YouTube. You got to share what you do behind the scenes on YouTube and how you do your job and share the information that you teach your clients. And it almost starts to put, especially business owners, into a corner where they feel like, okay, I got to be over here and I got to be over here and I got to do this and I got to do that. And it's just becoming, especially for small business owners, a lot. So my challenge to you is to think about, is this something that you actually genuinely enjoy doing? Or is it just something that you feel like you should be doing because maybe you got into a certain circle who's doing it or something like that? Because if it's not something that you genuinely enjoy doing, it's only going to cause more stress in your life, and it's going to come across to your viewers. They will, like, the growth or lack thereof will represent whether you are genuinely enjoying doing this or not. And I would encourage you to think, okay, if I am a business owner and I don't necessarily like doing this, or at least these certain aspects of it, is there somebody that could do it for you? You know, like, even if that means being the face of the channel, that there are businesses that do that. They are the face of the channel for the business. And it's not because the other person doesn't like being on camera. It's just not their thing. And that's totally okay. If you don't like, Scott Fisher said, I love YouTube too much. That's good. That's a good place to be. That's a good reason to be on YouTube. But I never want anybody to feel like they have to be on YouTube, like this is a chore to them. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to build your business. But if it's not something that you enjoy doing, then maybe we hand it off to somebody else to do it for us.
And to that point, like, where are you at right now? You know, if some of these traps have been kind of getting in your way, these mental barriers, and have left you already feeling really burnout and kind of in a place of, I'm not sure what to do next, give yourself the permission to say, I need to take a break. And that's okay.
Yes.
You know, because you may be in this position of like, a break is what you need right now. I say it to myself all the time. Sometimes we have to get behind so we can get ahead.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And that is, yeah, that is definitely not to say that there aren't parts about YouTube that are probably not your favorite things to do. That's any job, any endeavor that you take on, there's going to be the parts that are amazing and so fulfilling and totally worth all the parts that are not so fun to do. So it's not saying that, oh, you're going to be excited about every single thing, every video that you edit or anything like that. But if you're feeling that burnout, first, I would take a break, and then during that break, really do some soul searching. If you come back to it and you're like, this is just not for me, I don't want to be here, that's okay. I would just make sure that you're doing it because you feel really passionate about it, is what it all really comes down to.
Yeah.
All right. That was the last point. What's next?
Cool. Well, this is where we just blow the whole thing up, right? This is where Tim comes back and he's like, wow, everything looks really good. Seems like they really had it under control. And now, as I was saying I was like, maybe I just drop a bunch of F-bombs here, just like really make things interesting on everybody.
Let Tim know he can never trust us again.
That's right.
I love, with me saying this, how many people have shared how much they enjoy YouTube, and that makes me really happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, we got some good questions coming in here. We're going to answer some of those. So we're starting with our moderator here. Modern Day Tech says, I've noticed a lot of people compare themselves to other similar channels. What are some tips that you'd give to avoiding comparing each other?
Something that I found, something that a lot of creators do, is they'll honestly just unfollow some of those, whether that means unsubscribe to them on YouTube or, unfollow them on Instagram or mute them on Instagram or something like that. The first thing that comes to my mind is I would just try to actually separate yourself. Like, there's a balance, right? There's a balance between doing your research on your niche and what's working, and then going into a state of comparison. And if you feel like you're in that mindset of, I cannot look at this without comparing myself to it, then it's probably not the right time to be doing that research. And I would take a step back and go into it whenever you can go in with more of a neutral mindset, I guess, a neutral vision. And yeah, the first thing is I would just stop watching those videos or content creators that you are constantly comparing yourself to, because it tends to drown out basically like your creative identity. It starts to drown that out and blur it. And so the first thing that you need to do is separate from it, is what I would say. What would you say, London?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I have let some people go because of that very thing. And I'll take kind of a backwards approach to this, where if I look for people that, if I find myself comparing myself to somebody, I'll also look for what are the parts that I'm maybe comparing them to that I don't care for. And then I'll use that as leverage.
That's
and
good.
so I'll say, like, a lot of times in consults, like if we ever do a consult together, I might ask, like, who are some people that are in your niche that you watch, and what is it that you don't like about what they do? Because that's a really strong characteristic to then use to your advantage and say, I'm not like this, and we're getting deeper into the belief system of who we are, and I am like this. So as Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. So when we can, really come back to it and utilize those comparisons in a way that is helpful to us to draw more of our own individuality out, I think that's a more positive way to do that.
Yeah, I like what Travels with Delaney said here in the chat. They said, I have actually found watching channels outside of our niche to be useful. See things from a totally different perspective. And that is so true. Like, sometimes we get so trapped in our own niche and our own research and what's going on in our little world and what we're trying to do, that we lose sight of what's working in other places and what could we learn from that and incorporate that into our content. Because especially if we're doing research on our niche and watching other creators in our niche, how are we going to bring a different color? Like, how are we going to bring viewers to want to watch us versus those other creators if we are just comparing ourselves and trying to fit ourselves into a mold of their content? And so, yeah, I would definitely get outside of your normal bubble and watch a bunch of other creators.
Yep. Love it. Okay. Art Within Everything says, are there any tools that you guys would suggest using to help get the most from your channel's analytics? So if we were talking a little bit about like getting too caught up in the numbers, what are some tools you might suggest to use to get the most out of your analytics?
Tools outside of YouTube analytics or tools within YouTube analytics?
Let's maybe just give like a couple of your favorite things to look at that are measurable that you think would be easier than like getting caught up in these other things that we can't control as much.
Totally. Somebody said, who let Tim have a break? We fired him. He's gone. No. Okay. The first thing is I would look at your impressions and impressions click-through rate together. So that's going to tell you how well your title and thumbnail are performing. You don't want to separate those because your impressions and impressions click-through rate, they work together. So if you have a video with broad appeal, it's going to usually get higher impressions and a lower click-through rate. But if you have a video with a more niche, very specific appeal, then it could get lower impressions but a higher click-through rate. So something to keep in mind there. But that is something that is measurable, and I would really keep an eye on and look at from video to video, or create groups within your analytics, which we'll talk about here because I think that's another tool you should be using. But audience retention, I would definitely be looking at your audience retention graphs. You can only look at those from a video to video basis, but totally worth looking into because that actually tells you how much of your video your audience is actually watching and where they're dropping off and where they're rewatching or where they're skipping over and everything in between. It can give you a really clear picture, and you can start to cut down and shape your videos according to what the audience retention graph says. And then the last thing, this is just more of a tool. There's a ton of valuable metrics within YouTube analytics, but just as a tool within YouTube analytics is I would use groups. Like I mentioned earlier, it is a tool that you can create in the advanced mode of YouTube analytics, and that will allow you to create actual groups of videos. So you go in, you can create, like, let's say you try a certain style of thumbnail that has a blue background or something. Okay, all my thumbnails that have blue backgrounds, and then all my thumbnails that have yellow backgrounds. And then you can compare them to each other and see, does blue background on average over a plethora of topics and different types of videos and stuff like that, does it tend to get a higher click-through rate than the yellow thumbnails? And you can start to narrow down what's actually working on your channel and what's not. Do you have any thoughts there, Lennon?
No, I love it. Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said. Great. So Craftsmanship with Ash says, is there a tool or an organizer to focus on not getting lost in the weeds? I'm a new creator and don't know what to create, so I tend not to create.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
That's what we call that. Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Lennon?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it kind of comes back to this mindset thing a little bit more than the tool. I don't know that there's a tool that's going to like fix it for you, if I'm being honest. There's plenty of tools that you can use to help you organize. I use Notion. We use Trello inside our own stuff.
I use Monday.com.
Oh yeah, Monday.com. I was going to say AskMonday.com. I don't know why that's the thing.
No, that'd be Ask Jeeves.
Jeeves. I forgot about Jeeves. I don't know what he's up to these days.
Please tell me in the chat if you guys remember Ask Jeeves. But yeah, I use Monday.com.
So, but the thing is how do you then utilize that tool to make sure you're creating? And I think that it starts with, like Delana said, picking 2 or 3 topics that you feel really comfortable talking about and revolving it around that. I think that's a great way to start. Another thing that I'll do is I'll literally mind map something. So let's say that I'm like, oh, I want to talk about making money with creativity, right? So then I'll just draw a little box that says make money with creativity. And then I start to branch that out on a paper and say, well, what comes along with that? What are all the different things that attach to that statement? Obviously, there's going to be some mindset stuff. There's going to be some actual marketing and execution. There's going to be like understanding your audience, all these other things. So then I'm just looking at those, and now I've already got a little bit of a pathway to get somebody to that thing. And that can be a handful of videos in and of itself, or I can come up with a creative way to kind of put that together. And so starting with a couple of ideas, mind mapping those or kind of branching those out into, well, what are all the things that attach to these ideas? That's a great way to just say, okay, here's some good stuff to start with. And then you just got to be afraid. Like Delana told me to stop doing this too today, like embrace the suck. It's going to happen. We have to just like go out there and post stuff and get used to it, and just stop fearing what might happen if something goes wrong. Because 99.99%, nothing's going to happen if a video doesn't perform well. Like it's just not going to perform well. But you never know until you actually put it out there, right?
Yeah, it stemmed off of a quote that I heard actually from Gary Vee, where he said, put out, or something along the lines of, put out a piece of content every single day and get used to losing. Because that's one of the things as creators that we tend to hold our content so precious and so close to our hearts, which makes sense. It's for a lot of us, it's a piece of art for us, and it means a lot to us putting it out into the world, and it can feel really vulnerable sometimes. But one of the best things that we can do is just kind of, I don't want to say systematize it, because you don't want to detach from the human side of it, but we don't want to be putting all of our eggs in the basket of each new video, essentially, of like every new video has to be the epitome of our success. That's the kind of pressure that you don't want to put on your content.
Yeah, there's two things I'll highlight here. Straight Six Fan says, with a society so statistically driven, sometimes there's more data than we even need.
Yeah.
So many people want to create a new advanced statistic that it's easy to get lost in the categories that someone else made. This is so true.
So good.
And I was listening to a leadership podcast where they said that, having overcomplicated systems are actually detrimental in your growth as any organization. So even as an organization or a business gets more employees, the more that you complicate those systems, because so-and-so said, well, I decided to do it this way. And so they develop some sort of bylaw that says, well, you can't do this now without this. And now all of a sudden you got to call 3 people to get to the 4th person. And then all these things get more and more complicated. And we can do this to ourselves, and it prevents us from actually making progress. And I think that that's so important, to start to just simplify. The easier that you can make it, the better. I think that that's just going to help you to make a lot more progress all the way through, especially when we're in the situation of we're like most of us are trying to put at least a video out a week, if not more. So plenty of time, plenty of opportunity.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to craftsmanship with Ash, his original question, I do want to say something that might be helpful to you if you get stuck in analysis paralysis a lot, is make buckets for your content. So what are maybe like the top 3 categories that you typically create content within, like the top 3 topics or something like that, and start to separate it by those buckets. It's going to be different for every creator. Maybe you only have 2 buckets right now. Maybe you have 5 buckets. It's going to be different for everyone. But what I would do is create those buckets, so that way it starts to give you more, especially if you put it on something like Trello or Monday.com or wherever you like to work. It actually starts to give you a visual look at, oh, I have a lot of this type of content. I need to get more creative in this area, and start to put your creative gears in that area. And it can even spark a little bit of a light in you in terms of like inspiration. It can spark a little bit of inspiration to be like, oh, I've been doing a lot of this and now I need to focus over here. And just starting to lay it out in a way that organizes your brain a little bit can help to get you out of that analysis paralysis. But do be wary of what Lennon said, in the sense of like the systems can hold you back if you try to make them too complicated. But simple ways of separating things can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I have really enjoyed this. I do miss Tim, but just a little. It's not that much. I have I'm just kidding. I'll be glad when he's back. I do have, for you guys that are listening, just want you to know, Delana and I are really pushing for Tim to buy a jean jacket. So I have a secret, like a not so secret hope that he's at like a denim store right now buying a jean jacket. And, when he's going to come back, he's going to be wearing one.
Yeah. So next time you guys see him here on the live stream, if you're watching live, you guys need to give him a really hard time if he's not wearing a jean jacket.
That's right. It's been a lot of fun. Delana, do you have a quote of the day for us?
I do. Okay. Today's quote is, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Gordon A. Eady, I think is how you say the last name. That quote is also known to be said by Malcolm X, but I believe it was originally from Gordon. So what this means is share those human qualities, share like primal branding elements, which I've mentioned so many times for those who are familiar with them. Those are not external elements that we try to pull into our content. Those are internal elements that we try to pull out into our content to make it more human and bring those human elements and those opportunities for people to really feel a deep connection with us. And so don't be afraid to share beliefs about your niche, your industry, things like that, so that people can align themselves with you.
Also a great song by Aaron Tippin for those country fans out there. Got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So I posted a link to that in the chat. I'm actually not a huge country fan, but that's like the era of country that I remember actually being around my mom a lot, and she would be listening to some of that. So go check that song out. Great tune, great show, great fun. Thanks so much for joining us here for another live stream and podcast episode of the Video Creators Podcast. And we'll be back here next week with our fearless leader, Tim Schmoyer. We'll see you guys then.